Emily Slavic here. Excited to see everybody here on the Algo Live. Let me record here quick. All right, so Emily Slavic here, here at Algo, SVP of Product Management. For those that don't know, Algo is a supply chain intelligence company. We help suppliers and retailers with optimizing all of their supply chain inventory needs. So excited to meet you. And of course, I have a special guest here today, David Warrick. He's the former Global Supply Chain General Manager and Technology Officer from Microsoft. And not only that, but a special treat today is he's coming right from the Gartner SupplyChain Symposium. So lots of updates. I was talking to David a little bit before, and he just said, we're back. Everybody is back in person. We're seeing different faces and, building those relationships that, we haven't maybe seen in person in a couple of years. So lots of excitement going on at that symposium in total. So David, so nice to see you here today. How's it going? What's the action at the Gartner Symposium today?
Thanks, Emily. Well, I mean, as you said, it's kind of interesting after what you would call probably a 2-year hiatus. Everybody seems to have traveled this year to get to Gartner. And so, all of the sessions are packed full. There's a lot of people moving around on the expo floor. And it definitely feels like everything is back. And it's in Florida. It's in the Disneyland Resort, so the most wonderful place in the world, I think, is that what they call it? So it's great to see so many faces. Just after really not seeing a lot of people in the industry for several years, it's great to see so many people in person again.
Absolutely. Well, I am dying to know, what are some of the key findings? What is everybody talking about this year?
It's definitely kind of interesting. There's a lot of talk about where we are from an economic standpoint, what the future holds over the next 6, 12, 18 months. A lot of excitement still around visibility. It's still one of the key themes running across the entire supply chain. And interestingly enough, it's not just about the physical visibility of, trucks and ships and planes and everything else and cargo. It's actually around visibility into your supply chain and being able to get those end-to-end perspectives and those end-to-end views. And there is this constant theme of data being key to unlocking capabilities. And so there's, again, on the expo floor, there's just a huge demonstration of companies, some of the names that, that everybody would know very well in the industry, and some of the not so well. And the not so well is probably where I spent a little bit more time, because I'm always intrigued as to, what's the next thing and what people are thinking of. And definitely, I see that people have got over the first hurdle of, what does it look like on a map? What does it look like on a screen? And are really now sort of taking a step back and going, oh, I need to have the right data layer to be able to make this actually happen. And while that's a great realization, the hard bit, of course, is going to be, and how do people realize that vision and what do they do with it? So, I would think it's kind of where I thought it was going to be in terms of, a lot of the smaller presentations are around customer journeys, and where in particular a technology has helped the customer overcome a challenge. And some of those are really interesting because they're real life. This is what we did and this is how we changed. And you can feel the apprehension of, and what's the next step? What does machine learning really do? What can artificial intelligence really do? And I'm just not sure that we're right there yet. There's a lot of conversation about it, but it needs nearly another step, I think.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask that question of, are you seeing a lot of new faces or a lot of people that have been in supply chain? Because what I'm finding kind of at Algo is there's this emerging role, which is one that you actually had, which was, yes, supply chain, know-how and everything, but also, have a technology focus. Like there's a commitment, if you will, of knowing that data management is important, knowing that we need to embrace this new technology versus thinking about it or just having it a small initiative for the company. It's a big change. Are you seeing that shift start to happen, or where do you think people are kind of starting to fall on that spectrum?
It's a super interesting topic because I actually had a couple of conversations today whereby on occasion where the pendulum has actually swung too far. And so hiring really strong data people with no supply chain background, thinking that that was just going to be able to fix the problem, and then wondering why it didn't work, because supply chain is not just a math problem. Supply chain is about understanding all of those different transactions and how they play. And when I think about Algo, one of the great attributes for Algo is the fact that the company's from the industry. It's been in supply chain since its inception, and there's a very healthy understanding and depth of knowledge around how supply chains are meant to work and where the obvious pitfalls are. And so what I sense is that definitely companies are taking this very seriously and trying to figure out what is that bridge. But there's also some stories around how some companies have said, well, we just need to hire a lot of data people and then everything will be okay. And data, you have to pull intelligence from the data, and sometimes that intelligence needs context, and that context has to be some level of supply chain knowledge. And so again, every silver lining has a cloud, right? So I mean, I love to see the growth in the industry, but as the industry finds its way, it will tend to ebb and flow and pivot and then have to correct again. And I think we're in that mode of just learning as we go along, and things are starting to progress, but it's going to take time. It's a journey, and it will take some time.
Yeah, nope, that totally makes sense. And I've been thinking about that a little bit too, of, there's a sense of need of technology and automation, but the question of kind of where do we start? And, there's one hand of the vision of that versus actually operationalizing it and not saying,
right,
we have a new shiny software. Okay, well, what is it actually solving? What are the business outcomes that are being tied to, that element or that piece that's coming into fruition? So yeah, definitely resonates with me. We have one question from our live session here, so I'll pose that out. What are the challenges people are facing in their journey to achieve visibility and transparency? So I think you touched a little bit on that, but what are the key blockers or challenges you're seeing?
I think it's kind of interesting because I firmly believe that the solutions are available, but it's kind of like there's a belief that to have an enterprise capability, you need to have an enterprise solution. And my perspective is always, yeah, those days are gone. That's no longer the requirement. It's the companies like Algo who are able to provide an enterprise solution, not at the cost of an enterprise delivery, if you like. And that is it's almost like a barrier because it sounds too good to believe. And there's this, I think, inherent fear of, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably not going to be true. And everybody has war stories about how they went with this company and it didn't work out. And so I think that there's this growing, and the great thing is companies like Microsoft and Meta have actually really gone down this path and proven that it works, and reinvested and gone more and deeper and more. And so I think that's really powerful, but a lot of the industry still is catching up to a certain extent. And so the real challenge a little bit is having the belief that the technology will do what it says it's going to do. And this is some of the solutions that especially on visibility that we hear about today. There was some level of that available 10 years ago, and a lot of people jumped in, and the connected tissue wasn't there. I mean, machine learning and artificial intelligence was still too far away for it to play a significant role. And so it was almost as if the idea was there before the technology had actually caught up. This is a different time, and now the technology is actually ahead. And the real trick is to figure out how to leverage technology to enable. And this is, it sounds like the elusive obvious, but those are hard decisions that companies have to make. And there is still this build versus buy. If you've been running a supply chain on an architecture for a long time, and suddenly somebody appears with an incredible solution, and all you've ever done is build your own solutions, there's a fear there of, but this way has always worked. And it is all, maybe it's the supply chain renaissance, but there's something that still needs to happen, I think, to drive some of those conversations around, because this is our time. This is the time to move. This is the time to step forward. And you can't do that with fear. You do that with opportunity and with belief that the technology is ready to do what it's supposed to do. And so that's long-winded answer, but it's a super complex question and a very complex answer in terms of this is not a question of if, it's a question of when. And the speed of that journey will be dictated by how quickly chief supply chain officers embrace the opportunity to change and run with that. And I can see it happening. It's starting to move.
Yep. No, that sits with me too, especially when you say the build versus buy. So even myself have been working with inside of different retailers or suppliers. And what I found with the build versus buy was with the build, it was just slower and it wasn't the core competency of that company. The core competency of that company
Right.
isn't building supply chain or building IT infrastructure or whatever that might be. So it was slower, and it definitely wasn't ahead of the curve of what the latest and greatest might be looking like. And it also doesn't have like that industry knowledge trust of how is everybody looking at omni-channel and what should we anticipate now or into the future. But I also really just love that belief part of like, yes, you may have been burned at the beginning because the technology wasn't ready, but you can't hold back at this point, or you're going to be left behind, as you were saying, because it's
Exactly.
a matter.
Yeah. And it is, yeah. And that is, one of the interesting things is also the positioning, because when people see a solution for the first time and it is, something advanced, be it visibility or be it, retail analytics or control tower, they immediately think that it's a replacement for something that they have. So they automatically go straight to rip and replace. And well, we've spent all this money, we've spent all this time, we've got all these, core users. It would be a huge disruption for the company. And my perspective is, this is not about rip and replace. This is about augmentation. This is about enabling the architecture that you have spent years and a lot of money on actually building. It's now time to let that perform in its best possible scenario. And the way to do that may not be in continuing to re-engineer it. It may be to let your ERP do what it was designed to do and what it's incredibly good at, and layer new technology on top to give you a different experience and faster results in a highly customizable way. That's the thing here is, this is not an either or, it's an and equation. And if people can understand that and equation, it's really going to lift the industry up to the next level.
Oh, that makes me so excited when you describe it in that way, I must say. The other, question maybe I have, since you're there on the floor talking to people, anything else you're looking forward to or you're keeping your eye out for, as if you're getting a list of topics that are going to be discussed and you need to decide between them, what are you watching for, maybe anticipating in the next couple of days?
I mean, I think it's just always so good to hear the customer journeys, to hear how companies have taken a technology and adopted it and how it has really made a difference. And the thing that I love about that is not any one particular solution. It's the fact that it's changing the mindset. And when I look around the faces in the audience and I talk to people afterwards, the point is that it's starting to get this this building of excitement, which is really around the fact that technology is an enabler and how can we best now leverage it. And again, it doesn't sound like rocket science, but this has taken a long time to happen, because supply chain has always been more about the physical world than the digital world. And now supply chain is firmly ensconced. I mean, it's the digital supply chain as much as the physical supply chain. And so I'm excited to listen to more of those customer stories, because I always get something from them, not in terms of the actual solution, but in terms of how it might have changed a thought or a belief mindset in the company to do something different, because that's the real opportunity. Numerous solutions will do numerous things, but the real opportunity is people start to understand that this is a wave of change. And I think that's what allows Algo in particular to be perfectly placed, because Algo understands supply chain. Algo understands the history of supply chain and has been watching and been involved in the digital revolution, which means it's an easy fit and an easy conversation because you can dispel all of those fears and myths very quickly. And it's all about speed of deployment, quick results, early results, but then a visioning of what can this actually transform and where can this actually get to. And you know, I'm really proud of the work that the Algo team does, because that was my experience as a customer on the Microsoft side, that it was more about driving to the solution than it was about selling a product. And I think that it's the perfect time now, because that's what the industry is asking for, because they see a lot of these fancy presentations and they go, wow, we will never be able to do that. And I go, oh, but you can, you just haven't understood where yet. And that's those constant, affirmations of this is the art of the possible. These things are all real. And it's companies like Algo, which will help you get there in a super short space of time without having to rip and replace your entire infrastructure, without having to re-engineer everything. This is the time to do it. So can we all just hurry up and get on with it? So there's lots more exciting things that we have to go and do. So that it's the energy that I get excited by. And the one thing that I will say is, on the floor in the expo, where you've got a lot of companies on display and lots of people talking, there's an energy. There's still the energy. Nobody's downtrodden. Nobody is really, saying, wow, this is going to be really hard. Everybody's actually super positive, because there's a constant realization that supply chain is still broken. There's still a lot of things to be fixed. This is not going to get any easier for the next 12, 18 months, which means we all have a collective role to play to really help. And I think that positive energy is just, it's very, very, it's hard to ignore, and happy to be part of it.
Yep, awesome. Well, one last question from our live audience. The question is, how do you really measure the success of digital transformation? I think that's a good one. So that wasn't mine. I'll give credit where credit is due, but how do you start measuring the success of digital transformation? And as you were kind of talking, it's not a big, it's not a rip and replace. So you kind of take your first step and you start to see success. I know I have a couple of ideas of that, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are as well.
I mean, I think you have to get comfortable with the fact that there is no end to a digital transformation. It's a journey that will continue, because as technology continues to advance, you're going to be, again, digitally transforming, just at a different level in a different way. I kind of look at it and say, anything that you can make faster, anywhere where you can free up some time, anywhere where you can create a better experience for the customer, anywhere where you can reduce errors and automate tasks, simple tasks, that to me is success. And so I don't really get hung up on a gold medal, and if I achieve all of this, then I've been successful in digital transformation. To be honest, I actually look at it quite the other way, and I look for any single win across any discipline in supply chain, which reduces cost, increases profitability, frees up time. That's success. And the concept is, you should build on those successes. If you're able to improve everything you do by 1% in some way by leveraging a digital solution, it doesn't sound like an awful lot to be able to improve things by 1%, but when you start adding all those 1% up, you are digitally transforming your supply chain. And I love that concept of, can we stop talking about big bang and major engineering projects and just take one chunk at a time and see what we can do with it? And if we can make it 1% better, it's a success story, because it will change a mindset and it will allow us to do other things. So I don't believe that there's an end goal and a huge cup that somebody's going to lift up and say, I've successfully completed my digital transformation.
We're digitally transformed. Yeah.
Well, because I don't know what that answer looks like, because anybody that I know who's really, really good at it still has a list of things that they haven't even thought about trying yet. And that's part of the journey. The journey is transformation, and transformation isn't a once-off, it's a continual cycle. We'll find a better word to describe it somewhere in the next couple of years, but it's a beautiful thing. It's an evolution, and maybe that's what it should be called. It should be called the digital evolution, because it continues, it never stops. It continues to grow and get better. And that's the most amazing thing about it. So when anybody says, well, yeah, we haven't even started, it's like, well, have you automated anything? Have you even thought about the technology? Then you've started. And it's really important, because that first step is always the hardest, but it doesn't need to be a giant leap. It can be a small step, which can then lead to multiple other steps. So that's, my glass is always half full. So that's the way I think about it. But that makes sense to me, because, as somebody who headed up a supply chain for a long time, I understood the pain of trying to set a goal around a big event. And we always achieved more in a much faster way by doing things incrementally, but doing them really quickly. And that just, it's a better way, I think, to build energy.
I love it. Excellent. Well, I think those were all of my questions here today, and I know you're super busy hopping into all of the different discussions and meeting people. So thank you so much for taking the time here to chat with me and all of the Algo viewers. So if there's anybody here that would like to have a discovery session here with Algo to learn about how to take that first step, again, not the huge leap, that first step that David is talking about here, you can message the Algo LinkedIn, as well as the website that is right there on the link, and just set up a discussion point. We're just happy to talk and want to learn where some of your pain points are and maybe where we can help. So with that, thank you so much, David, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your trip and see everybody and have a wonderful time in person.
Thank you so much, Emily. Great to talk as always.
Excellent.